I'm here to talk to you a little bit about bonsai. Obviously, you're here, you'd like to learn a little bit more about and understand a little bit more about bonsai and the appreciation of the art form. I'd like to thank the Japanese Embassy for housing us this many past years and just tirelessly setting everything up for us and making everything available to us. They've done such a great job for us. And it gives us the opportunity to pass on our knowledge about Japanese culture in terms of the information related to the aesthetics and technical elements of the art form of bonsai. So, I always say the first thing you got to do if you're really interested in appreciating bonsai is to join the Ottawa Bonsai Society. That's the first thing you got to do, because in order to appreciate bonsai, you need to build your visual store. You need to look at a lot of bonsai and understand what's good about it, what's not so good about it, constructive critiques, discussion with other people, etc., etc., etc. It's an art form. There's no right or wrong. It's not black and white, but through discussion of the aesthetics of specific bonsai, you'll find out you'll learn a lot more. Okay, so obviously getting started, you need to understand the basics of the design principles involved, what we're trying to achieve in terms of bonsai, as in any art form. And to do that, you take the course that the Ottawa Bonsai Society. Hey, I'm shilly. Whatever. I'm not ashamed. Yeah, you got to join the society, take the course, go to the meetings. But online, there's so much information these days. But there's nothing like subscribing to a magazine as well, getting a real tactile sense in your hand, and attending shows like this, looking at all the trees and discussing with a lot of the society members that are helping out there, and asking them, what makes this a bonsai? Why is this a good bonsai? Is this not such a good bonsai? And if they're being truthful to you, 9 times out of 10 they'll say, it's pretty good, but, and they'll tell you 2 little things, okay? And that's what we're going to get into. So, what is bonsai? You're here. You came, you had an idea of what bonsai was. There's the answer, guys. Raise your hand, raise your hand.
In a pot?
It's a tree in a pot, that's right. That's the literal definition from Japanese of bon, tree, pot, okay? But there's so much more than that, right? So, in terms of the aesthetics, bonsai is trying to capture the essence or spirit of nature, okay, in a portable container. Because way back when, the lords and ladies in the Orient, what they were trying to do is they saw these beautiful, majestic trees up in the rocky cliffs and all that, and they had the money and wherewithal, and they said, well, I want that in my courtyard, okay? Now, they tried to take those trees down and all that, but they killed them all. Right? You can't do that easily. So they said, oh, geez, there must be a better way. So then they figured out, okay, we can collect smaller trees and then shape them like the bigger trees. And then we'll get evoke that same drama, that same sense of story that you get when you see those majestic trees out there. And we'll put it in our courtyard. Now, obviously, that was just for the filthy rich, and all that, so it's not the working class type of stuff, right? So that's the way it was for quite some time. Then the aesthetics came in, and what they call the literati, which was the artist class in the Orient, they got involved. They learned how to create the imagery that these noblemen wanted, by looking at it, and then they pass on that information through generation to generation. Okay? So you fast track to, we're close to World War II at that point. Let's go all the way to World War II. And then, so the returning war vets from Japan came and brought that knowledge of that back to the States. A few people started practicing it. Then the Japanese, they're trying to rebuild their economy. They said, wow, we've got a market over in the States there. We could really sell this stuff, right? So they said, okay, let's try and sell this stuff. And they said, well, how are we going to do that? Because it's hard to explain. It's hard to do. You know, we don't know how to do it. The government doesn't know anything about bonsai, right? So they took a whole bunch of bonsai experts in Japan and said, okay, Americans like it cut and dry, okay? They don't want none of this, live with me for 20 years, and that's not going to cut it, okay? They want it down on paper. Okay, so they went through like 300 experts. They talked to them, they interviewed them, they saw what they were doing, they all that. And they distilled it all down to what is still now the guiding design principles for bonsai. They wrote it all down for us. That's when it really took off. And right after the war, they distilled it all as purely economics. Okay? But as an art form, to the general public, that's when it really took off. I mean, it's been an art form for close to 2,000 years, which is still young for an art form, but so it really took off then, and that's when everybody started practicing it, and that's when it took off worldwide as well. So you've got the Japanese obviously used only material that was native to Japan, so temporary material, but it's practiced all around the world now with tropical material, with North American, you know, whatever material, so whatever you got. Obviously, they had to adapt some of the design principles and aesthetics based on what they had, so it's been adjusted. So now different schools of bonsai are coming out. It's great. It's like the renaissance for bonsai. It's just going crazy. It's branching out into various different schools now, and it's all the rage, right? So, but I would say that most of the schools have their roots in the Japanese design principles too. They tweak around a little bit here and there, especially for tropical materials, because they tend to be a lot lusher, a lot fuller, etc., different growth habits. But by and large, North American bonsai, European bonsai, etc., are rooted in the Japanese design principles. And that's what most of the members of the Ottawa Bonsai Society teach and practice, okay? So hopefully that's brought you up to speed on what bonsai is and what we're trying to do. We're trying to capture that spirit and essence of nature or some characteristic of nature, be it drama, serenity, playfulness, whatever that characteristic is that you want to convey, the artist wants to convey to you, is captured in a relatively portable container. Now in Japan, most bonsais are around 3 to 4 feet tall, and containers are about like that. So for most of us, that's not practical. This is probably a better size, especially at my age. This is a really good size. Okay, I've got bigger ones, but this is a good size. And so what I want to do is explain a few things, and what you're trying to do to convey that and to capture that sense of nature. Firstly, true to Japanese aesthetics, you want to keep it relatively simple. Okay, they like to pare it down, but it needs to be complex enough to maintain your interest. So there's that balance, complexity and simplicity. Okay, you need to say enough to convey what you want to convey, but not anymore. Okay, so simplicity of form is always a key design principle, and you do that through a lot of ways. But let's look at complexity. You look at the before picture of this, and you see it's basically a bush, right? The before picture. So let's say it's a garden center tree. It's a bush, and it's a very nice looking bush, and it would look great in your landscape, along with other bushes and other shapes and other colors and other things happening there. So it's part of a composition. But in terms of your visual acceptance of that, that's one shape. That's a ball over there. Okay? So for bonsai, that's not going to capture your interest for very long. All right? So what you're trying to do is open up and show the intrinsic qualities of the tree or the material, or develop the intrinsic qualities of the tree's material. Okay? So in this case, we opened it up. Now you have a better look at the roots. Okay? Adds visual stability to the composition. You see the main lines. You see the trunk line. There's a key one trunk line. This is an inform upright, so you have one inform upright trunk line. You see each of the branching structures. You can see the key branches in there. So those all are interest elements, they call it. Okay? So now we're adding up interest elements. We're creating, this one's newly formed. That was 3 weeks ago. I took that picture. And there's lots of new growth right now. Because this is temperate zone material, I could work on it. And I know how I'm going to be wintering it and all that. So I know it's going to be fine. Typically this time of year, everything goes to sleep. And you really shouldn't be working very much on trees. But it's a demo, and I've got material that I think will be all right. So I've worked on this tree 3 weeks ago. Lots of nice new growth. I'm going to baby it through the winter, and it should be fine. But each of these branches are going to develop into foliage pads, and then I'm going to keep open areas through there so that they act sort of like a picture frame around each of these interest elements, you see? So it's called mass and negative space. So you need trees that have very tight internodes that can cluster. You don't want loose, leggy things because it's hard to get tight, smaller masses in a small space, right? So you need small leaves, small internodes. This will push out, create a nice tight mass here, or several tight masses, and then you offset it with negative space, they call it. So negative space, this negative space here and here acts as the picture frame to this mass, okay? So you try and create several of those throughout the tree, okay? There's a lot to do with visual balance, etc. And the size of the masses. You can see that the tree has an overall triangular form, adds to the visual stability of the composition. You don't want to feel uneasy, the tree's going to fall out of the pot or anything like that, okay? It's supposed to be calming, serene. And the use of line, you notice that I'm trying with the wire and whatnot to get the angles of the branches to be all pretty much the same, coming out of the tree at basically a slight downward angle, just a little bit, for a couple of reasons. Largely because I made a mistake. I let this tree go too long, okay? Life gets busy sometimes, and you can't look after your trees as well as you would. So I let this one go for 2 years. August 21st was the last time I worked on the tree. And that was a mistake. Because boxwood is very hard wood, very rigid to move or bend if you don't get at it at the right time. This is the right time. This little branch here, that's the right time to move the branch. This one here, see what I'm trying to do now? I'm trying to use guy wires and yank it down, and I'll have to resort to clamps and all kinds of things. When it gets to this size, that's tough. That's going to be a tough one, okay? But it can be done. When they get to this size, you can't move it anymore. Not without a lot of trouble. They do it, professionals do it, but not me. I'm not going to do it. They'll split the trunk in half and then let the two sides slide and anything and stuff like that. But I'd rather not. But anyways, so mass and negative space, use of line, visual stability, the use of the triangle. There's a couple of other design principles, but those are key basic ones for your understanding. And that's what we're trying to do, is expose that frame of the tree and to create the mass and negative space that you probably see in a lot of the trees in the show. Okay? So look for those in terms of your assessment of the trees. Ask about that to the society members in there and say, boy, this one looks really full. The negative space looks a little lacking. Then they'll say, oh, okay, let's talk. But this one here, I had a few things I wanted to do to it. So we'll get into the techniques, because I was going to work on a couple of trees. I was going to work on these 3 trees here. That's these ones. 1, 2, 3. We'll see how many we get through in the time. But basically, I'm going to go from like the before to the after with those 2 trees. Okay? And I'll just trim this one up a little bit because I'm noticing 2 small things. So this branch here, you see how it curves down? It's an awkward curve. It's not nice and smooth like the other ones are. So I'm going to take that one right off. I'm using something called a concave cutter, which takes branches off without leaving much of a stub, so that it'll heal over and be relatively scarless. And it's the only real specialized tool that you have to have. You can substitute a lot of the other tools. And then these ones here are too high. I did a lot of cleanup, and I left a lot because I wanted to see what was going to come back, because I was trimming it so hard. Some branches inevitably die back on you and whatnot. But I've got enough here now that I don't think I'll be needing this. And I don't think I'll be needing this. And I'll be shortening or removing this branch anyways back to about here. So I'll leave it for now just in case. But and I leave a lot of what you call sacrificial branches. Like these 2 branches at the back, these thick branches, were left to thicken up the trunk of the tree faster. So this is a 16-year-old tree. I wouldn't say I've been working on it for 16 years. I've probably been working on it for half of that. Skip every couple of years, but you just leave it in the backyard and let it grow and do its thing when life gets busy, eh? So I think that's gonna be all right. The big problem is the top. I've let it get too leggy. There's not enough what they call taper to the tree, meaning thick at the base and thin at the top. It's becoming too tubular here. Okay, it'd be better if I use this as a new top, or this one or this one as a new top, and cut it there. Then you start to see the compactness better, and the proportion of trunk to height will make a better impression, more impact. Okay, but this is a tiny little twig. It'll take a good 5 to 10 years before that resolves itself to be a reasonable top. I'll be able to hide a little bit and whatnot over the development time, but that's a long growing season. So what I'm going to try and do is develop more branching structures down here, and then maybe use this one here as the new top. Problem with that is I'm going to leave a big scar in the front. Okay, unless I can hide that with some foliage or whatnot, then. And I've got another opportunity here as well. So I'm gonna think about it a little bit, because the top's the most visible part of the tree. I know it's the fastest growing part of the tree too, but I'll decide next spring what I do. Because once I do that, I can't glue it back on, right? So let me mull it over a little bit, and we'll see, okay? But and if you have any questions at any time, feel free. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
What do you mean by sacrificial branches? You said it'd make the trunk bigger if you just leave that?
These 2 big branches in the back aren't going to factor into the overall design of the tree.
You mean like relative to everything else, the trunk? What do you mean?
Yeah. These 2 big branches at the back have gotten this trunk this size in a shorter period than if I had removed them earlier, like 5 or 10 years ago.
Oh, okay. If you remove them, the trunk doesn't grow as fast?
It doesn't grow as quickly.
Oh, okay, that's what I meant.
The branches feed the section of trunk directly below it.
Oh, okay.
You have a question?
Hi.
So,
Speak loud.
Hi.
there are a lot of
How's
other.
the water and the soil? Could you
Pardon?
tell-
Water.
The soil and the water.
Yeah.
Could you tell us?
How often do you
Okay,
water?
well, It depends on the species, the watering, right? Whether they like more water, less water. You've got to learn the horticultural aspects of it. But in terms of bonsai, because we use shallower, flatter pots and wider pots, the water table is higher. So that means you need rockier soil in order for the water to drain properly. That doesn't mean the soil is dry. All the particles here are like clay pellets and pumice and lava and stuff like that. They hold water. So it's got a lot of water reservoir, but it also has air going in between those little pellets. Now air is the key component. You know, when you get pot bound, your roots are all around the outside of the pot there, right? That's because they're searching for air going down that space between the pot and the soil. When the soil dries, it recedes, leaving a little gap for the air to get in, and that's why the little fine feeder roots like it around there, because they're getting the air. And when you're over pot, when they're pot bound, it means the inside's not getting any more air. Okay? Your soil's too dense, or the roots have taken over and packed it so that they can't get in. So what we try to do is keep a very granular, pebbly soil like that. It's a mix of different ingredients for different species, like conifers and deciduous and tropicals. They all vary a little bit, but they're all pretty granular, different proportions, etc., etc. But that's why bonsai soil is so important. Okay?
Do you need bonsai soil?
Yeah, we call it bonsai soil, but it's a mixture of different components. Much rockier than dirt. We would never use dirt, okay, because it's too powdery, it's too fine. It would just clog up all the air spaces that we work so hard to create by sifting and cleaning out all these little rock pellets. Okay.
Where can we buy
The bonsai soil?
Yeah.
Yeah, bonsai stores. There's one in town. There's a couple. You can order them online, you know, and stuff. Heavy users make their own, you know, because it gets pretty expensive. But if you only have a couple of trees, much easier just go buy a 5-pound bag or something. But, yeah. Okay. All right.
So, boxwood is a broadleaf evergreen.
Yeah.
You turn those sacrifice branches into cultures, and that's still
You know, there's no such thing as a faux pas.
okay.
You do what you do, and you can justify it on both your design. If you can explain why you're doing it, then that's fine. Because I might leave those as gin. They're a little too long, obviously, but I could leave them as gin because it's a hardwood. It won't decay, and if I treat it like a conifer, it probably would be fine. I wouldn't do that for a maple softwood, or it's a hardwood, but it doesn't bear up well in bonsai conditions. It's too soft, so you wouldn't do it. And also, it's Japanese aesthetics. Gin is dead wood tips.
Okay.
Shari is dead wood on the trunk. Okay, so yeah, I wouldn't do that. It would be a faux pas in Japanese aesthetics, okay? But there's what they call a naturalistic school that has developed in Europe largely, and now is taking hold in the West Coast as well. Much more naturalistic form, and they would do gin and cherry on deciduous gin. Okay? Okay, so we're going to get started.